Hello again everyone. Now, in my next video series I will have a look at Ulf Andersson's games. That was a comment from one of my good friends. He basically suggested me to have a look at his games. There was only one comment on YouTube, so I have to accept it. So that's Ulf Andersson next. Well, basically he's a fascinating player. He's still sort of active, not as active as before, but he lives in Sweden. He's historically the best player of Sweden. And you know, at some point in the 80s he was actually number 4 in the world. And during the 80s, late 70s, 80s, he was almost always in top 10 in the world. And his style is enigmatically simple, clear, and technical. For some, he likes dry positions. He loves to go to the end games and then slowly squeeze the opponent in those simple positions. He loves rook endgames. You can learn a lot by studying his rook endings. And in general, his style, I think it's quite instructive to see how he squeezes an advantage from an apparently drawish position. Now, there's a beautiful book called Grandmaster Chess Strategy, how we can learn from Ulf Andersson, written by Kaufeld and Kern, 2 German chess players. So I will have a look at some of their examples in that beautiful book. I will pick up certain games that is, I think, the most instructive for me, and hopefully you will learn in the process as well. Now, this game was played between Ulf Andersson and Robotash in 1979. It's one of the most amazing examples of Ulf's career, I think, because as you will see, we will soon end up in this drawish looking ending, and then he will almost put black into Zugzwang. It's amazing how suddenly White's advantage becomes obvious in this game. Now, I should mention that Ulf Andersson really loved this double fianchetto opening system. He used it a lot in a lot of his games. You will see this idea of putting the bishops into those long diagonals. Now, d5 might not be the best move. Now, the current theory says knight a6 might be more exact. Simply just get the knight into the game and then push d5 next. But these are some of the nuances. d5 looks fine initially, but because you're exchanging a lot of pieces, and it just looks like that should favor black because you're playing against Ulf Andersson. He's a grandmaster, so why don't you exchange some pieces? That's exactly what Ulf Andersson wants. He prefers to go into such dry looking ending where there are no queens, minor pieces are exchanged, and yet, I mean, even the pawn structure is symmetrical, right? So what is black's problem exactly here in this position? Paradoxically, white has a couple of advantages in his disposal, and Ulf Andersson will turn it into a win, quite convincingly. Well, the first thing is, of course, the king's activity. Our king is well placed, it can support the center, and second of all, the knight on d4 is already developed. While the knight on b8 is still there. So we might easily get our rooks into the c file, at least easier than black does. But you will see why black will experience some problems here. Now, he played a6 in this position. He doesn't want to let the knight to jump onto this b5 square where he might harass the position. But the problem with a6 is, of course, that it weakens the b6 pawn. Now, it will take Ulf Andersson to take advantage of this. Now, maybe knight d7 was more exact, just to get the knight into the game, like this, allowing knight b5, and then getting the rook into the c file, at least exchanging one pair of rooks, and then playing a6. This would be a better version for black, simply because the knight is already developed, and yes, you have the control over the c file, but I can challenge the d file. And even here, white has an advantage because I can cement the knight on d4 for a while, closing the d file for you, and you still have this, you know, weaknesses in conjunction with the rook c6 or rook 7 idea. So for example here, it might not be so easy to defend this position in practice as well. It looks very symmetrical and dry perhaps, but things are not so easy already. So black has to make some tough decisions here. So king g2, a6, rook c1. Now that's another idea of a6, just to defend on the 7th rank like this. Now Ulf Andersson wants to double up the rooks. That's why rook c2. Now we are coming to a very interesting moment here. You should stop the video and find the best move for white. These examples are very nice, practical, and they are strategical ideas. I'm not going to ask you to find a tactic that you know decides the game. I will ask you to make a Ulf Andersson like move. So what do you think he played here? Obviously the most obvious idea is rook c1. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good move. But Ulf Andersson played a very instructive move that once you see the idea, it all becomes obvious. Yes, he played g4. It's a great move. The whole idea is to somehow undermine the pawn on f6. In some lines I can push g5 and then this pawn will be undermined, and then you know e5 pawn will be weak as well. The second point is that I gain a square for my king. In some lines my king can stay on g3. And third of all, it's never good for you to you know, of course I'm gaining space on the king side, I'm making it more difficult for you to push h5. And the second point is that it's never good for you to play g5 yourself, because then I gain a square on f5, right? Pawns cannot go backwards. So if you play g5, then f5 is permanently weak. And how can we take advantage of this? Yes, like this. So Ulf Andersson has a clear strategical idea in that line, to have a knight, cement a knight on f5, which would be very hard to defend with black if knight ever lands on f5. So these are some of the few ideas about g4. It's a great move. He played rook d6. He somehow tries to make it more difficult for white to get a rook on c6, but as you see, it's not sustainable. The rook will appear on c6 very soon. I love the simplicity of this game. Every idea is logical, but very powerful. Well, what else? He has to get the knight to d7. And now comes a very nice move, rook c6. Sort of a culmination of strategical ideas. Well, split rooks are not good for black, while white's rooks are coordinated. That's a big difference. And now, we have a rook on c6, while our opponent has a rook on a7. Obviously, you see which rook is a better piece, right? Our rook is basically dominating the game. King f7. And now you can again stop your video and find how Ulf improved his position here. Because yes, we have a great rook on c6, and yes, you have a weakness on b6, but one weakness is not enough, right? You usually need a second weakness in order to win the game. That second weakness might be the pawn on f6. So how can we route our knight to a square where it might attack f6? Right? Once you think in such terms, the idea becomes apparent. Knight d2. And the idea is to get the piece into the d5 square. It's a beautiful maneuvering idea, because once it lands on d5, then it will attack both weaknesses. You know, it will attack both the b6 weakness and f6 weakness. So this means d5 is an ideal square for the knight. So Ulf Andersson is just doing that. He's preparing that knight journey. Knight e4. It almost looks like zugzwang for black. It's amazing. Like in few moves, he finds himself into this position where he cannot improve his position. He just has to sit down and wait. b4 is another great idea, just gaining space on the queen side and just making it impossible for the knight to jump to c5 and exchange himself at some point. Well, black has to sit down and wait, really. There's nothing he can do, while Ulf Andersson is realizing that plan. Finally, our knight is ready to go to d5. Well, it's kind of desperate. Black tried f5, but it's hard to suggest something, because if you play king f7, then knight e5 comes. And if you try f5, then I will close it with b5, fixing your weakness on b6. Notice the knight cannot go to anywhere because she has to guard b6. It's a complete paralysis for black. He has to sit down and wait while white can improve the position. It's almost like Zugzwang, really. And eventually g5 comes, of course, and if you play f5, then just king f3. Just improving the position of the king, and white has all kind of ideas to have a breakthrough in this position, you know. That's just, for example, e4 is just one idea, right? And then if you play f4, then our king can enter the game. With h5, I mean, it's a collapse for black, basically. It's amazing how fragile the position become for black. He tried f5, knight e5 check, and then Ulf improves the final piece. You know, both pieces are well placed, they are perfectly placed, and now comes the final piece, the king. Well, he tried h5. Black is desperate, of course, because if you play like rook e8, then simply rook d6, attacking the knight. And for example, if you play like that, then I can push a4, and I have all kind of ideas to, you know, win the game. I can push a5, which means your a6 pawn is weak, and basically you're in a Zugzwang, literally, right? Like black is literally in a Zugzwang. The rook cannot move, knight cannot move, the king cannot go to a better square. You have to stop my king to go from g5. It's just game over. So he tried h5. Ulf Andersson play like this. It's a suffering for black. Simply suffering. It's almost like Zugzwang. Now you see, the king is basically collecting this weakness on h5. King takes h5 and black resigned, really. It's an amazing game to me, because basically Ulf Andersson achieved this position from a seemingly drawish opening, where a lot of pieces were exchanged. If you just go back to that line, I mean, look at this ending. It looks like, at first glance, why don't they shake hands and go home? But no, that's exactly when Ulf Andersson was feeling home, you know, in such seemingly dry positions. It's in those positions that his opponents will start suffering from Ulf Andersson torture. Because of his pure logical play, strategical logical play, and simple and clear moves and clear plans behind his moves are extremely instructive. It also shows how complex the game of chess is. There's always, you know, ideas that you can find, and you can thrive, and you can achieve victory, even in such dry positions. Because, I mean, look at this idea, first of all. g4 is such a beautiful positional move, where, you know, black lacks a clear answer. And then here, obviously, rook c6 is beautiful, just obtaining a much better rook. The material is still equal, but already here, white achieved a big advantage. And this final maneuvering is also very, very instructive, right? Like black cannot do anything basically against this. That's a beautiful, and it's also shows, you know, the principle of two weaknesses. Here, the principle of two weaknesses. One weakness is on b6. Yes, we sort of fixed it, but then we need the second weakness, right? And that's why knight d5 is coming. And once knight d5 happens, like this, then it will be impossible for black to hold the position, right? Because then, you know, our king can also enter the game, and then the whole position is just collapsing for black. The pieces don't have any squares. You just have to sit down and wait. So in this example, Ulf really shows how much you can achieve even with minimal pieces left on the board. As long as you have a couple of weaknesses in your opponent's camp, as long as you can activate your pieces, place them into better squares, then your opponent's position might collapse. So I hope you enjoyed this example. That's what this book sort of opens as well. That's the first book that they show in that beautiful book. So I will probably continue with some more Ulf Andersson examples. I'm open to your suggestions. If you have few games in mind, I can have a look at them. I might also have a look at some of his Catalan examples, because I play Catalan as white. So Ulf Andersson also achieved really beautiful victories with that opening in some endgames. So that's my plan for the future for a while. Thanks.